Hey, welcome everybody to Pro Mindset Podcast. This is your host, Craig Domann. Today we have Josh Sweeney as the guest. Josh has got quite the story. He's a Marine veteran. He's a Paralympian, and you don't typically become a Paralympian after you've been in the Marines and you're like a sniper kind of guy. So had something happen to him, and he's going to share today his story, his purpose, his pain, his mission, and hopefully you guys that are listening are going to learn something that is a takeaway for you from a young man that has overcome more adversity than any of us would like to have. Josh, welcome to Pro Mindset today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and asking me on here. I'm excited to talk about everything I've learned on this journey so far.
Kind of give us the rundown. You were sharing off air this accident happened in 2009. So let's go pre-2009. Who was Josh then? What was your game? What was your hobbies?
Yeah.
What was your life like? What were your dreams and goals?
Yeah. So I grew up Phoenix, Arizona, middle class family, like didn't have a ton of money, but had enough money to survive and through everything. And I would say that, my mom was a very strong willed woman. She was a teacher and she was smart enough to get me involved into sports as a young age. So I started playing everything that she could get me into when I like from t-ball to flag football to, soccer. And it wasn't until junior high that I really landed on playing hockey as what I actually wanted to do. All the other ones were what she wanted me to do, or at least get me into everything that I could. And she understood the value in being a multi sport athlete. I found roller hockey because a friend invited me out, and this was in Phoenix, right? Glendale, Arizona. And it was in the evenings that we would play after school. And the rink was like a chain link fence for boards. And it was, and there's no contact, but there's contact. And I just remember that was my first time I felt like I was on a team and was with a group of guys that we were all just rooting for each other, but also hard on each other because we wanted to win. And just that hockey mentality, that mindset that goes into being a player on that team. And I fell in love. So I played that junior high and high school. And then my mom also had me involved in Boy Scouts from kindergarten until I got my Eagle Scout at the age of, 16, which I don't know if that would have got done if it wasn't for her, because I was definitely not, I was in high school, right? I wasn't focused on finishing that anymore. And she said, no, you're finishing this, and helped me to do that. But, I'd say I was pretty well rounded. I think I got a lot more team / like military style thinking with the sports I was in, and then Boy Scouts. And I knew that I didn't want to go to college. It just wasn't something I was interested in. And in school, all I heard was, you're really smart, you're really bright, but you just don't want to imply yourself. I was like, yeah, I mean, you're right. And, and then, September 11th happened while I was in high school. And I remember thinking, maybe joining the military is what I need to do. Maybe that's where I'm being called to go. And it was scary, and I wasn't sure what I was getting into. And I mean, realistically, I did not know what I was getting into as much as I thought I knew, but it was a good choice that I made, and I'm glad I did it.
So walk us through what you were doing in the military, like 2007, 8, right in there.
Yeah. So initially when I joined, and like most recruiters, they tell you whatever they could do to get you in. But when I joined, I went into security forces. So you're trained up as infantry, and then you go for a couple years into security forces, which is like the SWAT team of the Marine Corps. So you're a reactionary force for any embassies. And I was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia, and we did some deployments around Europe and Spain and stuff, just kind of as a reactionary force. And then it wasn't till that time was done and I had to transfer into an infantry unit that I was afforded the opportunity to go to sniper school based on the amount of, good shooting I had done prior to that, and that I was a designated marksman within the FAST Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team that I was a part of. And so I went to an infantry unit, was put into the sniper platoon for them to decide whether or not they actually wanted to send me to sniper school, and was fortunate enough to go right before we deployed to Afghanistan in 2009.
Okay, so you weren't just a foot soldier, you were a sniper. Kind of share for the listeners, what does that really mean? We watch TV, we see movies, but what does that mean when you're living it?
Yeah. Realistically, it's a lot more logistics and planning than actually laying down and shooting and doing all the running around and the cool stuff that you might see in the movies. It's a lot of time spent figuring out what you're going to do and laying it all out there for the other units to decide off of and how they wanted to work. Or realistically, we are a support for the infantry unit that we are attached to. We're not really out there doing our own thing. What happens is a line unit or just like an infantry, like a normal platoon of infantry guys will come to us and say, "Hey, here's what we're planning on doing. Can you provide overwatch? Can you go out early and make sure that we don't have anything we're going to run into? Maybe, so that we're not going to get ambushed." And then you have to draw all that up, do all your paperwork, you know, present it to the officers that are in charge of everything. And then as long as you get the green light, okay, cool, you're good. You can go out and do that mission. And then if you're lucky enough to do the mission, then you might get to shoot. But realistically, most of the time, if you're shooting, you're compromised, which means that you're essentially like you're done. So by the time you start shooting, it means that you're already thinking about how am I getting out of here? Unless you are in a situation where you're, protected by the infantry unit, and that's where they want you to be. If we're out on our own or we're doing any kind of stuff, it's not as cool as the movies might make it seem. It's a lot more of planning and logistics.
Okay, so let's go to 2009. You're in Afghanistan. You're on a mission. You're deployed, which led to the biggest change in your life. Give us the rundown on, when you woke up that day, what were you thinking? What was the plan you were on? What was the mission you were on? And what happened?
Yeah, so I was deployed to Nowzat, Afghanistan with 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines. It was Lima Company, and we were waking up that morning with a plan to go and set in on our own in this area where we could see where they were moving some sort of like batteries or just things that they maybe weren't supposed to have that they were making IEDs out of. Nowzat, Afghanistan in the southern Helmand province is actually pretty well known for having a bunch of IEDs. And when we showed up, which improvised explosive devices, right? So there's essentially homemade bombs that they put in the ground. And when we showed up there, there was like an Air Force EOD guy that ran us through some training, even when we were there, to kind of show us on the ground, like, hey, a lot of IEDs in the area. This is what they look like. So we knew that there was a high threat level of an IED. But the plan was to go set in, see if we could provide overwatch observation over this area and just kind of get an idea of who's moving what and why. And we left super early in the morning. So it was probably like 3 or 4 in the morning. It was dark. We got to where we were planning on being for the day, kind of set everything up, and realized when the sun came up that we couldn't see what we thought we'd be able to see. For whatever reason, just the buildings and the way things were laid out and the roof that we were on wasn't going to work. So talked to the guys that I was with. I was the assistant team leader, talked to the team leader, and we essentially decided we had two options. We could either stay, hang out for the day, see what we could see, even though it wouldn't be exactly what we were planning on doing, and then head back that night, or we could move to a new location and hopefully be able to see what do what we had planned on doing. So talked to the guys and we decided to move. And it was during that movement that we were coming up on this house, this compound that we were going to set in, go up in the roof and provide overwatch from. And I realized we were starting to get bunched up after we had taken a security halt. So I'm looking around and I'm like, all right, so I got to decide what to do. Turned around to enter into the house and an IED exploded underneath me. And at that moment, everything went black. I just felt my body kind of lift up and then fall back down. And I couldn't breathe necessarily. I couldn't really talk. I felt like there was like dust and stuff in my mouth. And then I didn't lose consciousness, but when I finally could kind of get out what I was trying to say, I was essentially just calling out for help from my guys. And they came over, started just tearing all the flak jacket, like everything that I had, taking it off me, and started putting tourniquets on my legs, bandaging up my hands and arms, and they moved me onto a stretcher and kind of brought me out into this safer area. I basically was there for, I don't know, I feel like I don't even remember right now, but it was a long time, like longer than you might think. I don't remember exactly. I want to say 2 hours before the medevac could get us out of there, but it might have been closer to like 5 or 6. I really wish I could remember, but it was a journey of laying there and listening to everything happening around you and not being able to do anything while trying to stay awake because the corpsmen were like, don't fall asleep. If you fall asleep, you could die. We don't want that to happen. I couldn't get any kind of medication because they were worried that if they gave me anything, then it would thin my blood too much, and then I would just bleed out. So I was finally conscious, like awake, and my body was in fight or flight, more flight than anything else, like just ready to pass out. But I knew, like I looked at my hands and my arms, and they put a sheet over me, so I couldn't really see my legs, but I could see enough of the blood to know, like, all right, this isn't that great. And then as the rest of the teams were coming to save us, the QRF, Quick Reactionary Force, was coming to save us because there was also three other guys that were injured at that time. Another IED went off, and Cody Stanley, one of the other Marines, was killed just coming to try to get us. There was a helicopter overhead that was pararescue, and they were trying to land, but they couldn't because they were worried that it might land on an IED. The last thing they want is a helicopter to go down. And the whole time there's mortars going off. They're trying to figure out where exactly we are because somehow it got miscommunicated as to where exactly we were in the city. And it wasn't until a long time later that they finally had a reactionary force come in, pick me up, carry me out to what they call a dock in the box, which is essentially like one of those like moving boxes that you might see, or one of those bigger Connex box type things on the back of a truck that they had tricked out with medical supplies and equipment. And there was a doctor in there and a corpsman. And as soon as I got in there, they put the gas mask on me and I was out. Eventually, I guess what had happened was that dock in the box vehicle hit an IED. So then they had to get us on a helicopter that helicopter finally landed to be able to fly us out of there and get me to, I think Germany was the first place I went.
Okay, so let's go back to that day and that time. Can you remember what you were thinking? And is it something that you had thought before, or was it something that was like brand new? Have you ever, did you guys subconsciously or consciously think about what you're going to think about if you're ever injured, or was it just something where you're out of your mind?
No, I mean, we kind of joke about stuff like that. I think you almost have to. It's almost the way that you prepare yourself for when bad things happen. And I hadn't been in any kind of bad situations like that before. So I had made jokes about like, hey, if I get blown up, just like give me your pistols and leave me and I'll be fine. Like you guys can go. Just kind of it's just that dark humor that you have when and almost you have to have in the military. But when it happens, don't leave me. I was definitely laying there going like, man, I hope I make it out of this. But as time wore on, I do remember thinking like, "Ah, just let me go to sleep, and anytime I'd start to fall asleep, one of the corpsmen or the radio operator that was sitting right next to me, he'd like tap my shoulder, like shake me and be like, dude, what's up? You can't go to sleep. And then we would talk. And I actually did have one of the Marines. I do remember this. One of the Marines was freaking out. He was having a hard time with the situation and I just couldn't take it anymore. And I was sitting there and I just looked up over at him and I was like, come here, come sit down, come talk to me. Like, I need to stay awake. You need to stop freaking out. Just come sit and talk to me. And he did. He came over and he sat. I mean, I think that's just one of those really, really raw moments that happens when you're in a very bad situation. And I don't know, I think you see it on TV or maybe you see it in movies and it's obviously dramatized a little more. Um, but it's really just kind of a normal, almost boring situation that you're in that's very bad, and you just have to find a way to cope or make it through. And that was through conversation with the fellow Marines that I had there, calming down the one Marine, even though I probably was the last person he wanted to talk to in that situation. And yeah, I mean, I remember thinking like, I didn't have any thoughts about, like, oh, if I make it out of this, I'm gonna be a changed man or anything like that. I just was sort of laying there going like, I'm tired. My legs, the tourniquets on my legs hurt so bad. That was the worst because I remember they just hurt so bad that I was just like, I just want to be done. I just want to go to sleep. And I didn't really care at that point what was going to happen to me. And I think that's just what it was.
So when was it that you realized, and when were you told by a doc that they needed to do a double amputee of your legs?
So this was one of those funny moments that I remember actually physically laughing. So when I got to that dock in the box, they set me on the ground before lifting me up into the 7-ton vehicle. It was like, because it's higher off the ground. And I was like, what are you doing? And the doctor that was standing up there said, I need the most seriously injured person. And I looked dead at him. I said, that's me. And then he looked at the guys that were carrying me and they go, yeah, that's him. And because I was so aware, like I was so awake, like I wasn't on any drugs, like I'd been awake for so long. It was just like, I know what's up. And then they get me in the vehicle. And I remember the corpsman, I don't know if he was new, I don't really know, but there with that sheet that was over me, he lifted up the sheet and then he goes, "We got amputations." And I just remember kind of laughing, like almost just like of course, dude. Like, what do you, and then that's when they put the gas mask on me and I passed out. But it's just one of those weird situations, one of those weird things that happens. And then I didn't really understand the extent to my injuries. Like I knew that my legs were messed up. I didn't know how far the amputations or what it was, maybe at the knees if I was lucky. But my hands and my arms, I had like nerve damage. And so when I woke up, like I couldn't do anything. Like I couldn't feed myself. I couldn't even open my hands. They were like, because the nerve damage makes them like stick shut. So that was when I got to the hospital. I think I woke up and I was on some really weird drugs, so it was hard. It's kind of foggy, but I just remember waking up and asking the nurse, like, "Hey, do I still have my stuff?" And she was like, "Yeah." I was like, "All right, cool." And then I passed back out. Like, I don't know why at that moment that was the most important thing to me, but and then after that, they put me in a medically induced coma to get me to Bethesda, Maryland, which is where I spent a month in the ICU.
Okay, so in the human mind, in your human mind, what was going on when you were thinking about life after surgery and like what was going to be in your future? Because what you knew being a sniper in the Marines was no longer on the table. What was like, when did your mind shift? How did it shift? Was it immediate? Was it like, like a slow turn? How did it work?
It was definitely a slow turn. I think at first I was just trying to survive. Like my body was just trying to survive. And so my brain was just sort of, and like I said, I was on some harder drugs. So like I was just sort of in this weird balance of life. And it wasn't until I started to come off of those in Bethesda, Maryland, maybe after I had been there 2 to 3 weeks, that I remember my brain started to realize like, oh, we're not going to be able to do what we used to do. And I turned to my mom one day and was like, I'm not going to be able to play hockey anymore, which was really weird for me because hockey was never at the front of my mind. Like I would always play it when I would go home on leave and I would enjoy playing, but it wasn't something that I was like, oh, I can't wait to do. Or so when I said that, I kind of realized like, there's some stuff I'm not going to be able to do. And that's like the first thing that came to mind. And my mom being a mom, of course, like found some videos of sled hockey at that point and told me like, well, maybe we could check this out. And then I totally forgot about it because that was like 3 weeks or 4 weeks after I got hurt. And then after I had that kind of epiphany, my brain started switching to like, well, how am I going to feed myself? And had some amazing occupational therapists in the hospital there at Bethesda, Maryland, that figured out how to essentially make like a cast or like a piece of plastic that they could attach a spoon to so that I could eat. And I think that was kind of the first moment where my brain, like, that's when it all started to like be like, okay, it's going to be really hard to figure out how to do the things I used to do for now. But if I can just find these little things that can help me each day to get to the point that I want to be, or like talking to them helped me realize like there is options. It's going to be out of the box thinking and it's going to be unorthodox, but like you can figure it out if you just get creative.
Well, I want to thank you, number one, for your service. And number
Thank you.
two, I can't imagine being in that kind of situation where, you just, I mean, our brains are amazing because it basically shuts us down. So sometimes we can't feel pain. We don't think about the future. We don't think about our issues. What got you through the dog days, the suck days? In life, there's suck days. Your suck days were really sucky, but how did you get through those suck days?
Yeah, I think and really I remember the first time I had the hardest day because at ICU in Bethesda, there was a ton of support, ton of people, nurses coming in and out. My family was there the whole time. That was easy. At least it felt easier with that kind of help. When I transferred to San Antonio, Texas to start rehabilitation, I still had to spend I think it was like a week and a half in the hospital. And I felt okay. Like I felt fine, but they were telling me that my whatever levels in my blood or whatever was going on, like they were like, well, we're not ready to release you yet. And it wasn't in the ICU. It was just in a normal hospital room with like blank walls. There was like a little TV. And I just remember that was the first point where I was like, I got to get out of here. Like, I can't stay in here. And every day that they would come in and say, like, we're going to have to keep you another day, it was just like, oh my God. And throughout my life, those have been the hardest times. It's like those intermittent windows where maybe I don't have the direction. I feel stuck. Like I have something I want to do or figure out, but I can't just figure out how to get there or how to do it. And those are the hard times. Those have been the hard times that it's not usually the days that you might think of, like, I don't know, I mean, sure, we have those days where we wake up and we're like, man, I don't want to do anything. I just want to lay in bed, but you have to. And like, I feel like that's something I can overcome. I can have some coffee. I can eat something yummy. I can, like, I don't know, I could figure out a way to entertain myself enough to want to get going in the day. But it's when, like, I can't accomplish what I want to accomplish, or I can't figure out how to do what I want to do, or I'm in that weird limbo phase of like, I don't really want to be here and I want to be over here, but I can't really get rid of that. Those are the hard times. And I think, in my life, those are the times where I've had to learn how to pivot and transition. And I mean, I've done that, I guess, 3 or 4 times seriously now in my life. And, if I wasn't willing to transition or pivot or whatever, I could see myself ending up being into something that I shouldn't be in.
Okay, so you end up in competing in the Paralympics. How did that all develop?
So I finally get out of the hospital there in San Antonio, Texas, and I start going to rehab at the Center for the Intrepid, and they were big on sports, and my hands were still kind of stuck. I couldn't hold a bar to even do a pull-up, which, if you're a Marine, doing a pull-up is like, you just do it. And so not being able to do that, I just remember feeling like, oh my gosh, I got to get my strength back. Like, I got to get going. And there was a lot of other amputees and individuals that had been injured in combat in that facility. So it kind of felt like I was back on a team or with some guys that I could see every morning and, hey, how you doing? And like, hope, like, what's new with you? Or they kind of give you a hard time, which makes you feel good when you don't have, and because that's how it was in the military. They give each other a hard time. And then when you're in a world where everybody's being nice to you, it's kind of weird. But, back into that kind of guys unit area. And I remember they were like, hey, why don't you come try out some sports? We do on Fridays, we have a sport. So the first thing I played was dodgeball, if you can believe it. And I'm in a power chair because my hands don't work. So I can't push a wheelchair. And these guys are literally hurling dodgeballs at me. And I was like, this is ridiculous. But I was like, man, but I'm having a lot of fun. Like, this is cool. Then as I got stronger, I started to play like sitting volleyball. So I could scoot around on the ground, play volleyball. Like, that was cool. And then eventually I found out, also sort of because of my mom, that there was a local sled hockey program. And one of the physical therapists had talked to my mom and heard that I used to play hockey. And basically they were like, well, let's get you out there on the ice. And there was some hesitation, right? Like, I had played able-bodied hockey, and then hearing about disabled hockey, I was like, this probably is going to be lame. There's probably not even hitting. It's, do we do it in our wheelchair? I don't know what it is. And he said, whatever, just come watch a game. You'll figure it out. So I did. I went out on the weekend. They had like a Midwest Sled Hockey League tournament on the weekend, went out and watched it. And the first thing I did when I rolled in the rink was I like smelled the rink, and it's just kind of that musty rubber mixed with ice, weird smell. And it brought me back to being a kid. And I was like, all right, well, that's kind of cool. Like, I remember that. And then once I got into the rink and I saw those guys flying in the sleds, hitting each other in the corner, fighting over the puck, skating it back down to the other end, I was like, okay, that definitely looks like real hockey. I got to try and play this. And from there, I would go out to these practices and my hands and everything would hurt and it would ache. And like, cause still didn't have grip to, like, I was still getting over, like, it was sort of a rehabilitation through hockey at that point, because I didn't need to be in the physical therapy room, right? I needed to be doing sports or doing something that would push me, and my brain would shut off, or it would be focused on the puck or what my next movement or whatever. And then when I would finish, I'd be like, oh, my shoulders, my arms, everything hurts. And it was amazing to me that I could also be back on a team playing a sport that I loved. I had guys that they weren't out there saying like, oh, good job, good thing you came out today. They're out there saying like, catch that pass, dude. That was a beautiful pass. Why didn't you catch it? And I'm like, well, because I'm new. And I'm like, okay, well, figure it out. And it just drove me, and it made me feel like an athlete again. It made me feel like just a person again, and not somebody that was fighting to get through something, but just someone that was just wanting to play a game. And that's where the Paralympic journey started. And when I realized that you could play for the United States of America and give me another opportunity to represent the United States of America. Like, I didn't think after I got injured that I would be able to continue to wear, stars and stripes and red, white, and blue and be out there on the international stage. And I loved it. I love being a part of a team, but I also love the United States of America, and being able to combine both of those again and get to the Paralympics was now my big dream.
In my brain, I go to 3 stages. Stage number 1 is like general population, going to the mall, going to something, and you being disabled, not having your legs, it's different. Okay. To being on the ice and you're the same. You're just athletes. You're all trying to freaking win. You're trying to if you ain't cheating, you're not trying type thing. And it's like nobody's looking at you differently because everybody's got something. And then the third stage is when you're doing it for your country and you're playing against other people trying to win a medal. And it's like, I would say put myself in your shoes, which I'm not. I would love to be in that stage where I'm just one of the guys competing my ass off and making fun of my guys and pushing them and ribbing them and, all those kind of things. So give me feedback on those stages.
Yeah. The first stage was tough, especially at first, going to the mall, even in San Antonio, a place where there's a fair amount of disabled individuals, and having everybody look at you all the time, and at first, I think like anything, there's a little bit of a shock factor. You're like, oh, that kid just said like, hey, that guy doesn't have any legs, and my brain was trying to I don't know, whatever. Like, does it matter? I don't know think it matters. But now I think I'm confident enough and just good enough in my own skin that I don't care. And I actually laugh at it. Now my kids are the ones, Dad, did you hear that kid? And I'm like, yeah, I know. And it's cool. And I'll wave and say hi, and it is what it is. Oh, and then 2, I think stage 2 is my favorite. Like, just being with the guys, even the physical contact of playing hockey, like hitting each other. Like, that was a big thing for me, because I think being in a wheelchair, like, we don't make contact with people, we don't jump around. We don't like hit each other. Like, even to this day, when I go see other individuals in wheelchairs, like, I might tap them on the shoulder and be like, hey, how you doing? But I'm not like chest bumping. I'm not shoulder checking like I used to do as a young kid. And it was weird, I think, to not have that sort of physical touch with those other guys, and kind of just as small as it is, I think, as a young male. And so being on a team and being out there and hitting each other and like laughing and like shoulder checking each other into the boards and just screwing with each other, like, that was where I felt like a little kid again. And I felt like, man, this is awesome. Like, I'm back with the boys, like, I'm having a good time. But it's also serious, and we also care, like, we care about each other, but we also care about our development. And I think we care enough about each other to care about our development. Like, we want to see our buddies succeed. Like, I want to see the guys do good. I want to see him catch that pass and score. Like, that would be awesome. He's been working so hard. But I'm not going to tell him that. What I'm going to say is, catch that pass, dude. And so it's that's my favorite. I think my favorite. But yeah, being able to take it to the elite level, it's awesome. And I think it allows me to train harder, to compete harder. When I think about when I'm competing, and now as a cross country racer for, Nordic skiing, cross country skiing racer, it's a lot harder to continually push myself, because the races can be so physically demanding. They can be mentally just exhausting, because you're just constantly working to grind up these hills, maneuvering on the downhills. You don't feel like you're getting any rest. But knowing that I'm doing this for my country, knowing that I'm doing it with a purpose that is bigger than myself, it just drives me to keep wanting to drive deeper and go faster and work harder, and really allows me to reach levels that I wouldn't reach otherwise.
Okay. You shared earlier you have 2 kids. Okay. How old and ages? Or ages
8 and
and
10. Yeah, Zoe's 8, my daughter's 8, and son's Sawyer is 10.
okay. So you got 10 and 8-year-old. That's awesome. Your life experiences, how does it help them be more successful, more adjusted, more driven, more motivated than they might have been if you didn't have this issue?
Yeah, I think as far as adjusted goes, I think they are definitely well more adjusted to the fact that they're individuals with disabilities. And I don't even think they see them as, in fact, a story, I know for a fact they don't see kids with disabilities as kids with disabilities, because when it comes to an Easter egg hunt that we have every year here in Boise that is full of disabled population, they will just run through those kids to get those eggs. And at first I was like, that's awesome. And then I was like, wait, hold on. And I was like, guys, you can't be doing that. You can't just go run through, like, this is made for them. It's and it's on asphalt or whatever, concrete. So like anybody in wheelchairs can go pick up eggs and stuff. But I think it's great for that. I think it's awesome that they will be able to use that to help their peers understand that, like, oh yeah, they're in a wheelchair, but my dad's in a wheelchair. He does all kinds of stuff. It doesn't matter. Like, they're still people. Like, what's their name? They're not the kid in the wheelchair. They're Johnny or whatever, and I think that that's awesome. And I do think that my kids are both very, I don't know how to say it, but basically, like, they're always looking for solutions, and they're pretty creative in the way that they're trying to find them. I think it's because they see me all day, every day. I'm trying to figure stuff out, whether it's in the garage with my business, making adaptive sports equipment, or it's outside. How am I going to move this giant thing from here to there? Or if we go somewhere and there's a curve, like, all right, well, what is he going to do to get around that? Or how's he going to handle that situation? So they're constantly seeing me just like, well, we're going to do this, or we're going to figure that out. We're going to adapt and make it happen. So I think it's great.
Made a really great point about creative solutions. How does it help you be more successful because of the way you think like that you may not think that way as intensely as you do now, but for the fact that you have to?
It's been huge.
How does it show up, like, even in your competitions?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like ever since I've gotten injured, my life has been just a battle to figure out how to do something better in any way possible. And everything from, somebody cross country skiing, for example, competitions, they might look at their sit ski that they got from so and so and be like, all right, this is all I have. This is what I'm going to make work, and I'm going to make it work, and I'm going to do my best with it. Whereas I've made 3 to 4 of my own sit skis, changing seat positions, making it lighter, changing the way that the feet are on the bottom, moving that position, like adapting every single thing I could to get to the point where skiing felt just fluid, perfect. And then I went, well, should my poles be longer? Should they be shorter? Maybe on climbing courses, they're shorter. Maybe on longer, flatter courses, they're longer, because I don't have to have such a fast turnover, be nice and fluid. So I've changed all that. And even with sled hockey, it was playing with sticks. There's so, like, white tape versus black tape. Like, there's so many little things that you can do and change in the way you tape, that it's constantly looking for a solution to an answer that I don't know how to answer, and trying things out and being okay with trying things out. I've learned how to weld so that I could make my own stuff. Like, so I had to figure out how to weld to be able to do all this. It's just a constant search for, I like to think of it as pursuing excellence through creativity, because
You got your
I'm
own
just
YouTube channel for DIY and everything you're doing, right? Um,
seriously.
can you, maybe a dumb question, but can you create these poles that are adjustable so that depending on where you're on the course, you could adjust them, or is that realistic?
It just, I don't know, maybe, but it just depends. I mean, most courses are, you could get away with one pole. You also want to be super light, and the ones that I have are ridiculously light. Could be something to look into. I'm happy to explore it.
No. Okay. So how did you do in the 2026 Paralympics?
It did good. Not as good as I wanted, though. So I will still be training and I will still be competing at the next one. But my main focus was biathlon, and I wanted to take biathlon to the next level. This season, I was having an amazing season, and in 3 races, I had 2 fifth-place finishes and 1 sixth-place finish, which I'm extremely proud of. But then the night before the relay race, so there's a relay race or mixed relay. There's 4 individuals from Team USA. We don't get to know whether or not we're asked to be on that team until the night before. So I get a call the night before the relay race, and they say, "Hey, would you like to be on the relay?" I was like, "Of course I do." They last games, they won a gold medal, and I want to help extend that legacy and go back to back, because I think that would be amazing. And sure enough, we did it. We got another gold medal. I was the first one to start and it was extremely stressful. It was the most stressed out I've ever been for a race because of the pressure to not fail. And I know that's not what you want to be focusing on when you're racing, but it's hard to get that out of your mind until the gun goes off. But I will say I was successful that as soon as the gun went off, I executed my plan exactly how I wanted, which was essentially don't let anybody past you until you're ready to let them past you. Then once they pass you, you hang on to them as long as you can, and then you beat them right at the end. And for my leg, that's what I did. And then the other three athletes and racers cleaned it up, and yeah, we were fortunate enough to win another gold medal at the last games.
So you have a gold medal.
And I have one from 2014 as well for sled hockey.
Wow. So you got two gold medals. You have a Purple Heart. And share for everybody. Everybody kind of knows Purple Heart is what it is, but kind of share what it is.
Yeah, so Purple Heart is for an individual service member that was injured in combat. And I have mixed feelings about it, but I'm very proud of the fact that I was able to go and do my best. And, it was unfortunate that I got hurt. And I sometimes think like, well, it would have been nice to not get hurt. But then I remember that I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't gotten hurt, and I wouldn't have had the opportunities or the experiences or learned as much as I have if not. So I am grateful for everything I have so far in life.
That is awesome. Yeah, it's funny how really bad things can happen and they end up being, you find blessings in them somehow, you know?
Hmm.
Don't get me wrong. There's certain things you'd probably like to have, differently, but given the fact that you're in that situation, you've certainly been one of those guys that has gone on to do awesome things.
Thank you.
What would you, let's say, for example, you were doing teletherapy with somebody that just lost their legs, just had them amputated today, and they go, "Hey, Josh, we want you to talk to them." They're in a hospital somewhere. What would you tell that person? Let's say it was a military guy who you've been down that road. You've been through that path. And that dude right now is probably in shock and he's like pissed off and frustrated and angry, at God and everybody else. But how would you lighten up that guy's day?
Yeah, I guess the first thing I would say is just that I know it's hard, but if you find something you're passionate about and you use that to help others, it gets a whole lot easier. I find everything I do for the most part now is to serve some form of, whether it's the adaptive sports community, whether it's my kids, it's my partner, there I'm constantly essentially trying to make myself useful in ways that will help others or give back to the communities that have given to me. And I find that that makes me much more grateful, much happier, and allows me to do things that I didn't think that I would be capable of doing. And I would tell anybody or, any individual going through a hard time or somebody who's recently had some sort of big injury is to just find something you're passionate about, as small as it may be, and find another group that's also passionate about that, or talk to somebody about that passion and see where it goes and follow it. And if it doesn't work out or, you realize you're kind of at a dead end with that, that's fine. See what else you can be passionate about because like I said, like after being injured, like I went from sled hockey, I tried triathlon, took that to the elite level, realized that it's not really for me, found Nordic skiing, and now I'm competing on the Nordic skiing team. And I mean, those are all sports, but I also love fabricating. I love making things. And I have a group of individuals that I can call and be like, hey, do you want to try to make this? Or I'm having trouble with this or having trouble with that. And we can help each other. And I think that just building that community based on things that I care about to be able to help others is what drives me every day.
One of the things that you said that really stuck with me was the idea that when you smelled the ice, it put you back in your kid zone. And that's where your passion zone is when you are acting like you're 7, 8, 9, 10, like your own kids. I think something that all of us could learn is everybody needs to have that, in something, because otherwise life is such a grind if you're just working all the time. If you can tap into that kid mentality to where you really enjoy it and you kind of forget about all the other BS of the world, great place to be, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
What's the biggest thing you've learned since your injury that before your injury you never thought, you never dreamed that you would learn? So let me rephrase that. We all want to be the best version of ourselves. What version of you did you become or have you become, and how you show up for your kids and your partner and in the world that you maybe wouldn't have done, but for the fact that you had this pivot in 2009?
Yeah, I think it's just the ability to let go of who you were. That's that's been huge for me multiple times, almost daily sometimes with the kids and parenting, and saying, you know what, I tried doing this, I really did, I gave it my all. It's not working. I'm not happy. I'm not having fun. It's not benefiting me. I'm going to try something new. And if I wouldn't have done that, or if I wouldn't have allowed myself to let go of my former self or the stuck, maybe stuck in the rut person I was, I wouldn't be who I am today. And it's hard, because you're comfortable. You're in maybe a place you've always been, and maybe you don't want to let go because you're like, oh, it's fine. Like, this is just the way it's always been. This is who I am. I go work this job. It's just the way it goes. But I don't think that there's growth there. I don't think there's happiness there. And I think that that is what has allowed me to do the incredible things that I've done.
Here's what I heard in the last hour is that you're very adaptive, you're creative, you are not stuck, you know how to change, you're very solution minded, and you can be those things before your injury. But I think right now, for the last 17 years, you've had to. And so you're probably really good at it, and it's like the sky's the limit. Right now, you've got certain like lanes you're living in, but those skills and that attitude is transferable to anything. You can do anything. So is there anything, Josh, anything that we didn't talk about you'd like to mention to our audience?
No, I think that's pretty much most of it. I mean, I'd say just, find things you like doing and have fun.
Amen, brother. There you have it. I want to thank Josh for his service. I want to thank him for being on Pro Mindset today. I want to thank him for just his attitude of gratitude, his attitude of just like living his best life, regardless of his situations. All of us have our own challenges and adversities. Take a page from Josh and be creative, be solution minded, and everybody go out and have a great day. Hey, it's Craig Domann, the host of Pro Mindset Podcast. I want to thank you for listening or watching today's show. And you can catch us every week on the normal social media platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and all the listening podcast platforms. I hope you enjoyed today's show. And more importantly, I hope you gained a pro mindset insight. Please be sure to rate and review Pro Mindset Podcast. And I look forward to catching up with you on our next show.